Hello and welcome to the 42 Rugby Weekly. Only two more sleeps until the Six Nations is here again, so we're getting very excited. Murray Kinsella here, sitting into the presenter seat in the absence of Gavin Casey, but don't fear, he'll be back next week. Joining me today, as always, is the one and only Bernard Jackman. How are you, Birch?
Yeah, really good, thanks. Equally excited about the Six Nations and looking forward to doing a good preview here.
Yeah, all a bit different this year, obviously, but we'll make the best of it. We're also joined by former Munster man Mike Sherry. Great to have you back, Mike. How's all there?
Good. Hoping I'm coming through loud and clear. Having a few technical difficulties as always, but happy to be here. Looking forward to going through a preview of the Six Nations coming up.
Yeah, that's a beautiful connection, I'm pleased to say. Also delighted to say that for this year's Six Nations, William Hill have come on board to sponsor the podcast, as well as all of the 42's coverage of the tournament. William Hill, it's who you play with. Please gamble responsibly, and for more information, visit dunlewy.net. But Birch, first up, breaking news yesterday evening, a bit of a surprise, I suppose, late in the week. Josh Adams, the Wales wing, has been suspended for 2 games, a breach of the COVID-19 protocols. Basically, players let out of camp. He had a small gathering with his family, which was very much against the protocols, and reportedly for a gender reveal party, which I kind of had to look up, to be honest. I didn't really know what that was. But how big a blow is it for them to lose Josh Adams, especially so close to the game?
Yeah, it's a massive blow. Probably it was a key guy for Warren Gatland in 2019. Obviously came into the Welsh team from Worcester, had been the Scarlets in the academy, was let go. And in fairness to him, I'd actually tried to sign him for the Dragons before he blew up in Worcester. Not saying that I saw talent. It was pretty obvious he was pretty good. But what the great thing about Josh Adams is his attitude, and his agent Derwin Jones brought him down to Worcester just to meet the director of rugby, and there was training going on at the time, and he'd no kit with him, but he asked could he borrow some kit just to get involved, and he hadn't even signed a contract yet. He's just one of these guys who super enthusiastic and probably plays like that, so he probably punches above his weight, scores tries when he probably shouldn't. He's not the fastest, he's not the most powerful, but had made a massive impact at international level, and obviously the Blues brought him back this year. Probably hasn't, Blues form probably wasn't great and wasn't getting as much ball, and Wales form wasn't as great in 2020 and wasn't getting as much ball, but I think he would have started this weekend, and it's probably just another headache for Wayne Pivac, who can't seem to catch a break, and it's definitely an advantage for Ireland. With Liam Williams being out, I think Josh Adams would have been a key guy for them, and in their back three options. So yeah, it's a disaster for him. He's been suspended for 2 weeks. And just note to everybody, just be careful when you go to a gender reveal party. There could be repercussions.
Yeah, it's definitely not what Wayne Pivac needed. He's already under a bit of pressure, and this is one of the most frustrating reasons, I guess, a player will have for missing a game. Mike, we actually got a question about this on the members WhatsApp group, members.the42.ie, if people want to join on there. It's from Eric. He says, what's the most stupid reason you've ever heard for a player missing a game or getting banned? Can you think any there?
One comes to mind. Baldwin, the Welsh hooker, a bit of a theme, Welsh lads. He had his hand bitten by a lion, wasn't it, down in South Africa, coming up to a game. Wasn't another Welsh lad, Powell, didn't he miss a game for going down the motorway on a golf cart or something like that? So definitely a theme there.
Okay, there's a theme. Apologies to our West listeners. I don't know, is there something about these guys, Bernard?
No comment.
Well, I definitely would have some stories from the Dragons, but because we've already, gone down the Welsh route, I don't want to be seen as being anti-Welsh. So probably mine. And look at my worst one was in France. We had a week off, and we had a second row who basically came to us and said, "Oh, look, can you go in for a procedure?" He wanted to get a snip on a day off on the Wednesday, and that was no problem. He said the doctor said he'd be fine to train on the Monday, and we had a match the following week. And he came in on Monday, but unfortunately he had an infection, and he basically could hardly walk. So he ended up missing about 2 or 3 games. So that's probably the worst one I've seen in terms of being, pain. I actually physically felt the pain looking at it, but he had to miss the game.
That is shocking. What did you put on the injury report that week?
I can't remember. I left it to the doctor and the medical team.
Mur, I don't know if you remember this, but when we were in the academy back in Munster, I was on holidays with Paul Rowley, and he dived into the water thinking it was quite deep as he was running in from the beach, and it was very shallow. He dug his hand into the sand and he actually broke his hand. So he arrived back for pre-season with his hand in a big splint, and I think they thought he'd been fighting or something, sinister, when it really was a complete accident. And I think he missed the first half of pre-season, and they were sceptical of him after that.
Well, it sounds like a fake reason, doesn't it? I'm just thinking of Jack Carty. Didn't he rupture his spleen on a water slide?
Off this water slide
in Spain?
Yeah.
Oh man, that's another frustrating one. So there's many stories like this, but a blow for the Welsh. Obviously a blow for Ireland this week as well, Mike, with Caelan Doris ruled out. Obviously more serious reasons there. Fingers crossed he gets good treatment and diagnosis, I suppose, concussion-related symptoms there. He's gone back to Leinster. But I suppose how big a loss is that one to Ireland? He's obviously a young guy, 22 still, only 7 caps, but it feels like already he's kind of become an important player.
Yeah, I think you're right. Massive loss, and he has become extremely important, even though he does only have seven caps, as you say. So big loss there. Obviously, health first, particularly when it comes to concussion, and hopefully he gets the treatment he needs and take time. He's young, a lot of caps, a lot of games ahead of him. So the most important thing is to rest and get that right first. I suppose it blows open the whole back row. Within the Irish squad, I think he was pretty much nailed down as the number 8, and it was who you slotted in either side of him. I would envisage that CJ would probably slot back into number 8, and you might get a bit more of a balance there, maybe with Pete at 6 and Connors or Josh van der Fleer at 7. So it definitely opens it up, and it is a big loss. I'm gutted for the guy. On the flip side, you see someone like Gavin Coombs going up to camp now, who I feel definitely deserves a crack up there, even just to train with the lads, get involved in that environment. And I think it's just reward for the last couple of months that he's put in.
Yeah, absolutely. Ryan Baird getting a chance in there again. 2 guys definitely for the future. Bernard, we got loads of questions about the back row. Caelan in the WhatsApp group, he says, what would the lads' preferred back row be for Wales? Colin on Twitter was asking, what does your back row look like for the Wales game? Everyone's really interested in this. Team's not named until tomorrow. But first of all, which way would you personally go if you were picking that back row to take on Wales?
Yeah, look, I think he was going to go CJ at 6, Doris at 8, and Peter at 7, and that was very effective against Scotland. With Doris out now, I agree. I think CJ will go back to 8, and I don't think they'll go with Ruddock at 6 and leave Peter at 7. I think they'll flip Peter back across to 6 and go for Connors. I think Will Connors will start at 7, and that's certainly the rumour this week. And I can see a balance to that. I don't think the game is going to be really free flowing, despite Pibak trying to implement that style he had at Scarlet. So probably the need for Van der Fleer isn't as great in this game, and there's huge pressure on both coaches. I mean, Pibak's under massive pressure in Wales, but if Farrell was to lose, I think quite quickly you'd see the pressure flip onto him, because not because losing to Wales is any is a bad thing, because they've obviously got very good players, but just because of the form they're in, and particularly how poorly the regions bar Ospreys have been going. So it's a very hard game to kind of get ready for and predict, particularly because Wales, they've had such trauma in terms of losing their defence coach during the Autumn Cup. Getting Jenkins has come in. He hasn't really coached defence for a club side, so we don't really know how he's going to set up, bar the fact that he's probably going to be very similar to try and copy what Sean Edwards did. And that certainly was probably the criticism of Byron Haywood. So it's fascinating. But I think Connors, Peter and CJ will be a nice back row balance.
If it is Connors, Mike, what have you seen in his game? I mean, renowned obviously for his chop tackling. Are you seeing him round out his game, maybe push some of his other skills?
Yeah, that is his main point of difference, I suppose. Look, he hasn't played a lot of rugby at this level, so it's hard to say, but he's obviously a very talented player. I think the more he gets on the ball and the more he gets involved in kind of link play, kind of in that kind of Gleeson role back in the day, an out-and-out 7, definitely added a lot to the attack. So that's something that he could bring to the game. I think Josh van der Fleer does that very well, and probably doesn't doesn't get a lot of mention about that. His work rate and his defensive speed off the line, his chop tackling as well, is probably what he's renowned for. But I think he runs brilliant lines, and I think he's a really good link player. So that's something that Connors could bring to the game. And look, the more he plays at this level, the more that will come. And it's quite a baptism of fire to be rounding out your game at international level as opposed to club level and Magners League or Pro 14 level. I went old school there with Magners League. Apologies.
Yeah, and Keith Gleeson. we love old school here, to be fair, and he was some player, changed the role a bit, didn't he? So it'll be really interesting to see which way they go. As we say, team named tomorrow, Friday. And we actually got a question from Connor. He was saying, why have Ireland changed their announcements gradually from 4 days out back to Schmidt's kind of mantra of 2 days out? Is it with injuries, COVID, etc.? And I think it is that, really. It's just to give themselves a bit more scope in actually naming a team and not having to change at that late stage, as well as a little bit of uncertainty for the players as well, which I think always helps in terms of the training quality. So fascinating to see which way that goes tomorrow. But Bernard, coming into this championship, it's obviously pretty soon after the most recent Ireland campaign, which is rare enough. Usually you have to wait a few more months to this, but it was December the last time they played against Scotland. And with the home fixtures against France and England, you look at that as a chance to win usually. What is your sense of what Ireland need to be better at in this championship if they're going to go and actually contend to win it?
Yeah, I think it's the Paul O'Connell factor kind of leads to what they need to be better at. So I think their line out needs to be better. Their line out maul needs to be more of a weapon. And there's a bit of a debate, I suppose. Was our attacking breakdown underperforming because our attack was poor, or was our attack poor because of our attacking breakdown? So Paul has been given the mandate to go in and fix that or improve that. And also, I think the hope is that our defence will become stronger with Simon Easterby having just sole responsibility for that and having more time to specialise in that. So I think they're the areas. Look, I think, there hasn't been a change there, but, my cat, you would expect this Six Nations to see further improvements in our attacking game. But, I think the key focus area would be on our attacking breakdown and our ability to win quality ball off the line out to launch off, or to be able to turn mauls into attacking opportunities or potentially points.
And I'll come to you on this as well, Mike, but just to follow up on that, Birch, like, what issues did you identify at line out and maul time that are things that can be fixed quickly by someone like Paul O'Connell?
Yeah, I just didn't think we had real variety in it. And I mean, look at the Munster, just take an example of the Munster maul against Claremont. And, they were probably a smaller pack, probably not as physical, yet they were really smart and intelligent in terms of how they mauled and the construction of that maul and where they shifted the point of contact, really well. And you saw us in France, for example, in the Autumn Cup, throwing the ball to the front, trying to shift drive, but the actual down the front, but the actual construction of it wasn't smart. There wasn't enough detail in it. We were too slow getting set, and by the time we did get set up, we were already being marched towards the touchline and actually thrown over the touchline. And it was a huge psychological boost. And there was another example in the second half where we threw it to the back and we tried to shift drive off the back and we allowed Gail Fiku come in, a winger come in and destroy it. So we just weren't as detailed or as nailed on in those areas as we had been back in 2017, 18, where it was a big weapon for us, and we were able to win penalties and kick to the corner and convert them into further penalties and sometimes pressure on referees to give yellow cards or tries. So, I do think that we're not the biggest pack in the world. So if we are going to have an attacking maul weapon, our construction and our detail and our ability to find weaknesses in the opposition maul D is going to be crucial. And I think that's an area of the game that Paul was very good at. He enjoyed it. And I'm excited to see, look, it's not going to be brilliant. Well, hopefully it will be brilliant, but it'll take a little bit of time. But I would like to see improvements in that.
Yeah, I think back to that 2014-15, the double Six Nations, and Paul O'Connell ran a beautiful line out and maul at that stage as a player. And it sounds like if you want detail, Mike, he's the guy to go to. It sounds like he's just bunkered down for the last year watching footage of lineouts over and over again. What was he like to work with in that sense? How big a nerd in terms of lineout is he?
Massive. Yeah, massive. It just drove him on every week. He was constantly looking at footage. I know this is this rehashed information. Everyone knows that he does this kind of stuff, but I think Birch makes a great point that, it's the smaller intricacies of how you build your maul, what angles you go at, where you go at the weakness. It's not just winning the ball and either a straight maul or a shift maul and it's 8 lads pushing against 8 lads. There's certain ways of building mauls and exposing weaknesses depending on how the trends you see of how they defend, if they hold people off, if they have people down the blind side. So I think he'll be looking into that. And as you say, he has spent a long time not involved in the daily grind of coming up with tactics and plans for opposition. He's been allowed to kind of step back from rugby, and he would have spent a lot of time on his laptop going over international games, seeing what the trends were, and he'll definitely try to implement them. I think another great point Birch made was the attacking breakdown. He was absolutely obsessed with breakdown when he was a player, particularly when he got involved with Joe Schmidt up at Ireland. It translated down to what he brought to Munster. He was already hot on it, but when he went up there and saw the detail that Schmidt brought into his actual attacking breakdown and the difference it brought to the attacking game, he tried to implement that down with us guys that weren't up in Ireland camp as much or at all. So he'll definitely have certain thoughts on that, and I would expect to see an improvement, a speed of ball that maybe hasn't been there over the last year.
Like he's still inexperienced in a coaching sense, Mike. Obviously, Ireland under-20s, he did stuff with the Munster Academy, had a year in Stade Francais. It didn't sound too happy from his point of view. And obviously, coaching is about more than the technical and tactical detail, really. Did you see traits in him when you were playing with him that suggested, he's actually good at getting information across, at inspiring change maybe? Did he have those traits as a player as well?
Yeah, most definitely. You used the word there, inspiring. That's how he operated, through his words and his deeds on the pitch. He had a brilliant mix of being able to fire people up and also being able to get into the detail and walk through things. And he was he was intimidating. There's no doubt about it. As a young guy coming in, really intimidating to work with someone with such high standards, but he had a really good mix of being able to take people aside and build up trust and confidence in yourself, and just endless time to talk through things, walk through things, practice them after sessions, before sessions. So he'll bring all that to his role. And even as a player, again, rehashing old information, but he was as a coach as well. He 50-50 spread of the workload. He'd work hand in hand with the forwards coach on lineouts, on scrums was also a thing he was massively into as a second row. I know we spoke about Quinn Rue before and how much pleasure he took out of scrums. Paul was the same. He took massive joy in scrummaging and helping out his tight-headed. So all those things he'll bring to the role. He is relatively inexperienced, but as an inexperienced coach, I don't think you could ask for someone with more passion and experience as a player to translate it over.
Paul did a huge amount of work, laptop study, etc. But the gift he had, I felt, was, and just seeing him in Irish camp, was the ability to simplify it. Then he's on record. I saw him speaking at some leadership summit. He showed a photograph of the post-it note that he used to write the lineouts on. You know what I mean? So there was a huge amount of work done in the background to get down to this menu of 10 options. And so the players were the ones that, if you're the hooker or the rest of the lineouts, you benefited from all that homework, and then he was able to streamline it down to the 10 options he would need to be able to win quality ball, or to be able to maul off, or whatever, to exit off. And I think that'll be really helpful for James Ryan and Ian Henderson as well, just being able to understand the process of seeing where the weaknesses are, looking at what we do, where our strengths are, and then creating a streamlined menu with get out options, etc. So and I give you an example. I mean, some line out forwards, if things go wrong, they try and make it more complicated, and they want more movements, more dummies, etc., which it can work, but sometimes it actually creates more opportunities for the defensive line out to get after your ball. Whereas my impression from Paul was he looked at actually, okay, where's the issue here, and execution is more important, and to be able to really simplify it, and speed kills. So I'd expect a lot of tempo, a lot of detail and fast throws on this weekend. And look, as I said, you can't expect him to solve the world in 2 weeks or whatever he's been in camp. But I do think that coaching staff did need a little bit of help, and hopefully he's the man to do it.
Absolutely going to be fascinating to see what impact he makes in a short space of time. Obviously, a few returning players as well who weren't there at the end of the autumn series. Furlong, Larmer's back, Ringrose, Dave Kilcoyne as well. Do you think this is a stronger squad, Mike, than what Farrell was working with in autumn, when obviously we saw a fair bit of change and experimentation and fresh faces? He seems to have a more settled group. Do you think it's a stronger squad?
Well, by the names you just read out, it would definitely be stronger. Furlong is one of, if not the best tight head prop in the world. Ringrose is absolute quality. Larmer on his day can open up any defence, and Dave Kilcoyne, I think he just adds something very different off the bench if he's not starting. That's probably the main role we've seen him in with Ireland. I'd love to see him get a few starts, but obviously very, very hard with someone like Cian Healy there. So yeah, him coming off the bench adds something completely different. I don't think I've seen someone carry with as much venom as he does, and it just again, it opens up defences in a different way to how Larmer or Ringrose might. But on the flip side, you have Doris now, who's out of commission for however long, so you'll get players back, but you will pick up injuries in training and in games, so it's a balancing act. I do think it's a more settled group, given the fact that they've gone through a campaign with this coaching staff, 2 campaigns now in fact. I know broken up and whatever else, but I think that 7 weeks or 8 weeks that they had pre-Christmas will definitely stand to them. And you would hope that more and more of what Farrell is trying to do, what Cat's trying to do, will come across in how they're playing. You saw elements of it over the last year and a half, but the longer you're in camp and the more games you're playing, the more systems you're running through, and the more familiar you are with that, it should translate onto the pitch.
On that, Bernard, and you mentioned the attack is a big one there. It's kind of a national obsession, Ireland's attack, even in the Joe Schmidt era. It's what we always spoke about, even when they were winning. Where do you think Ireland are trying to get to under Farrell and Cat? And where are they coming from in terms of their philosophical slant on it? And what about the attack specifically needs to be better to make them a more dangerous team?
Yeah, well, I think being able to hurt teams in transition and from counter-attack, we know that that's a rich source of line breaks and points for certain teams, and probably was an area that we didn't really exploit very well over the last year. I think we've seen some improvements in our plays, our strike plays off line now in particular. Having said that, some of the strike plays we've used to good effect are effectively Leinster plays. So we haven't really seen a clear identity of, or haven't seen a huge amount of a clear identity of the Mike Cat philosophy. It's apparently play heads up, keep the ball alive, offloading game with ability to get the ball to Witt, and we have seen glimpses of it. Haven't said that, but it's worked better against softer defences, and that's going to be a concern for me a little bit if Wales do implement that real aggressive rush. Will we get caught playing inside the 15s like we did against England last year in Twickenham and become very easy to shut down? And I think that's where Ringrose coming in as that second playmaker will be absolutely huge for us, in terms of being able to have the confidence to throw that extra pass and to get into that 50-meter channel and I suppose go forward. But yeah, it's not really clear what our attacking philosophy is. And as I said, I believe internally there's a bit of it wasn't clear what was to blame. Was it the breakdown or was it the structure? So hopefully we get the breakdown right, and then we'll be able to actually understand, if the structure works, and if it does, great, and if not, what we need to do to fix it.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how that develops and morphs, I suppose. We've had a few questions about Andrew Porter here. He was up for interview yesterday and obviously answering questions about potentially moving back to loosehead, which Andy Farrell had said was still in Ireland's thinking. He's been tight head now for obviously years, did a bit of loosehead for the World Cup. Paddy in the WhatsApp group says, we're debating Porter's future again, whether it'll be loosehead or tight head. Can the lads see something happening in this Six Nations? And then Brendan on Twitter also says, will we see Porter at loosehead with O'Toole off the bench at tight head? And then Connor asks, how big an ask is it for him to shift across? What's your sense of all this, Mike? Obviously an incredible, explosive athlete, and he's doing a fine job at tight head. He's become really important. Do you see a bit of scope there for him to shift across, or is it too much to ask?
From his perspective, he's obviously going to say he just wants to play. So wherever they pick him, he's going to put his best foot forward and, plough on with that. I think tight head is probably his better side of the scrum. But he can do a job at loosehead, there's no doubt. He is a huge man, and that can counterbalance a lot of inefficiencies he might have. Now, I don't see any inefficiencies in how he scrummages. But it's a big ask to go over both sides of the scrum at international level. There's a reason why not a lot of people do it. From a coach's point of view, they probably want to have their best players on the pitch, and he adds a lot around breakdown defensively, certainly. And it's quite a nice prospect to have himself and Furlong either side of the scrum on the pitch with what they can do. So it's a possibility that you could see that. It wouldn't surprise me. Personally, I think he should concentrate on tight head, but it's very hard to do that when Tadhg Furlong is there waiting to come back in, and he just wants to play rugby. So if that means playing on the loosehead side, he will do that. I think we're well served on the loosehead side. I think it would be beneficial for him and Ireland if he concentrated on the tight head side, and you're there looking at Furlong and Porter tight head, and Healy and Kilcoyne on the loose head, which is 4 top quality international props.
What do you think, Birch?
Yeah, I think that the probably post Saracens, it came up again around Porter's future. I think probably among the Irish coaching staff, but I agree with Mike. I think the problem is we're way better stacked at loose heads at the moment than we are tight heads. So I know Tom O'Toole is in there, but he's a project. He's a long term play. Finney Bealham had been in there, and he's out now. I think the issue is the age profile of Kilcoyne and Healy. They're probably looking to say, well, look at we have lots of loose heads. We have Eric O'Sullivan, we have James Cronin, etc. But after Porter's probably the next best loose head after Healy and Kilcoyne, which is probably where they're caught. But I would say we don't have enough depth at tight head to risk moving him across now, and I don't see him moving across into Six Nations unless we got an injury to Killer or Keane. But potentially they're looking at 2023. I think they've offered Keane a 1-year contract. Healy could easily make the World Cup 2023. Killer should make the World Cup 2023. So I don't see a massive need to move him. He's always going to be a key man in the match day squad, whether either he starts or backs up Tadhg as a tight head. I think the rest of the tight heads have a long way to go to get ahead of Porter. Okay, scrum wise, potentially he has some work to do, but around the field and his ability to have big impacts over the course of, we saw nearly 80 minutes against Munster. I mean, he's incredibly fit, durable, robust. He's exactly what you want in your tight heads, and I think it's a conversation for down the road. But when I say down the road, post 2023.
Yeah, serious prospect. He's only 25, Andrew Porter. A man of many gifts, actually, thanks to Irish Cancer Society. They sent me out one of the masks he designed, pretty cool as well. So there's plenty to him off the pitch as well. Just briefly, I know it's different. You guys were hookers, obviously. Did you ever have to play anywhere else in the front row? I can imagine that would be a pretty tough shift.
Birch would have had the size to maybe transition. I certainly didn't. Maybe as a young fella, but not in any way past under 16s did I play anywhere past hooker.
I had the midriff. Mike's body fat was too low. No, when I was in Sale under Steve Diamond, I was 21, and he basically tried to convert me. He offered me a 2-year contract to stay, but to convert as a loose head, and I said, no, look at hooker's hard enough. I'm getting out of here, so I came back to Ireland. But yeah, I was nearly put into the back. Glenn Ross tried to convert me into a 7, which was even more daunting. I remember I played a match against Munster, and Axel, Lord of mercy on him, broke from the back of the scrum, and I think he scored a try before I realised the ball was out. So yeah, I've had a couple of flirtations with different positions, but hooker was the only position that would have me.
You were giving your all to your flanker.
I was. That's it. Scrum first, Mike. Scrum first, Mike. That's it. Eric Elwood wasn't happy as Axel ran over.
That's brilliant. Mike, you would have done a good job in the back row, I think.
Sorry, I thought we were only speaking about front row. Yes, I did play a bit in the back row. I played across the back row, yeah, but probably realised I was a little bit too stumpy and slow, so moved further up. But yeah, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the back row.
The front row union, we're very lucky to have you both. Finally, just on this game, Bernard, you mentioned Wales before and where they are. Shane was on to us on WhatsApp. He said, let me get the question here. Will Wales's pedigree of player and long rugby tradition count for anything in this tournament against their poor club form for the last few seasons? What's your sense of that and where the game is at in Wales? Because we've seen in the past the national team has been successful despite poor regional form.
Yeah.
Can that be overlooked anymore?
Look, at the challenge for Wales is that a lot of disruption has happened at the same time. So they lost Warren Gatland, they lost Sean Edwards, they lost Robin McBride, they lost their team manager Dumper, who's gone to the Lions. They lost Rob Howley, and that gave them huge stability. And there's lots of studies around the importance of cohesion in teams and sport, and Wales had that cohesion, and they had massive confidence in Warren. So because of his track record, so when they went into camp, they didn't really care about their form as regional side. They believed that the Welsh coaching team were top notch and they'd had success and believed in everything. The problem is that they all left at the same time, and they went for a replacement from within Wales, which is always a difficult one because there's such politics in the game there and lack of trust from each of the regions. So every call Wayne Pivac makes where he picks a Scarlets player is under more scrutiny than an outsider. So that didn't help. And you even see the two Welsh nines, the two Scarlets nines being in ahead of someone like Rhys Webb, who's in fairness come back to Wales and been in great form, and that can cause some angst and certainly some negative chat. Then they lose, particularly they don't keep Edwards, who, and let's be honest, under Warren, it was the Welsh defence was probably the most impressive part of their game. And they had injuries to some key guys like Ken Owens, Alan Wynne-Jones, etc. And they're trying to change the way they attack. So there's been a huge amount of fluctuation. Plus, we have to mention that, at WRU level, there's been a huge amount of change. 2 heads of performance have gone. New chairman, new CEO, player salary cuts, central contracts were out, now they're back in. Player banding. So there's been so many issues off the field that, unfortunately for Warren or for Wayne, have probably affected the mood and the confidence in the squad. And it's up to him now. His head's on the block. I mean, if he has a poor Six Nations, he probably will get the sack because he'll be the scapegoat. But he also has to, a huge part of the Welsh performances has been feeding off the energy of crowds because they're not used to crowds at regional level. When they play international rugby, it's a huge spike in terms of their emotion, and they're not even going to have that this weekend. And even in fairness, they lost in the autumn to Scotland in Parky Scarlets, which again, you're an international team and you have to play your games in a regional base. So I feel sorry for Pivac. I think it's been incredibly tough for him. But and it's hard to know how they're going to play. But when you look at the team, they're probably going to pick out. They're probably going to pick. Owens probably start. Tom Francis is a quality tight head. Whether they go with Jake Ball or Adam Beard to accompany Alan Wynne-Jones, they've got very good second rows. Lydiate is back. Tipperick, Faletau. Okay, their best rugby's probably behind them, but those type of names are more than capable of getting that spike in their performance level one more time. And it's a dangerous game for us as well. Okay, there's huge pressure on Pivac, but I mean, as I said, I think the pressure on Farrell is massive as well. If we lose Wales away, it could be just the start of a very tough campaign for us. So, we're basically going on, in terms of being able to predict the Welsh performance, we have to back these players who've done it over the years to spike for Six Nations. If they do that, they have the quality to beat us. But it's very hard to see any form because they've lost 7 out of 10 games in 2020.
It feels like a really decisive game for both of them, as you say, in similarish positions after weird first years in charge, following kind of legacy coaches. So it really is all in the balance. It's going to be fascinating. First up on Saturday, though, Italy v France. Yeah, sorry, that's the first fixture at 2:15 p.m. This is going to be a really enjoyable one. Seeing Les Bleus go again, because Mike, last year they really underlined their resurgence and the fact that they're here to compete now, and that's the word coming out of their camp. It's time for them to actually go and win a title. What have you enjoyed or admired about what they've done on the pitch to actually make those improvements?
Yeah, it's brilliant to be chatting about the French setup in a positive light. It was so doom and gloom for so long. They've brought through a really good crop of young players, good core through the squad, through their starting 15. Their 9 is now probably the best 9 on form in the world. He's completely dictating games he plays in, which is what the French, they love that. They love a 9 to the only thing he doesn't do is kick a goal, which is, I don't know if he does that for club, but he doesn't do it for France, which is rare for a French 9. But, he's completely determining the outcome of games through massive moments, through just complete quality in what he's doing. And that's infiltrating the whole team. You can tell that they're targeting 2023. They got their ship in order. Coming up to it, they have all the structures in place. It's I don't know what was. Bert would have more of an idea, but it seemed like absolute chaos, and they just needed someone to come in, grab it by the scruff of the neck, and organize it. Just put structures in place. They had all the foundations there that they could lean on: the players, the facilities, the club game, the money. It was all there. It just needed someone to really organise it, and I think that's what they've done. I think the players realise the opportunity that's there with a home World Cup in 2023, and like you say, it is time for them now to go and win a Six Nations or two, put in a couple of really good campaigns leading up to that World Cup, and you have to fancy them come 2.5 years' time, and I would fancy them for this Six Nations as well.
Interesting. They have a couple of injuries, I suppose, Birch, with Roman Ntamack and Vermi Vakatawa out at the moment. What's the depth of talent like there? Because it looked pretty decent last autumn when they played that final of the Nations Cup against England. What's your sense of guys stepping into those big boots?
Yeah, I think they have probably them and England have the most depth. But I just thought that final against England was an unbelievably positive experience for them. Even though they lost the game, they went with effectively their third choice team, and they went toe to toe with England. Lost unluckily by 2 points in the end, but. The bright spark of of those changes that they needed to make because of the agreement with the clubs is someone like Brice Doolan, who looked like he was out of the picture. Had an opportunity to play. He played incredibly well, and now he's starting against Italy again. I mean, the back three they have against Italy, Brice Doolan, Teddy Thomas, and Villiers, the Toulon winger, is an absolute rocket. I mean, it's just so exciting to think about those three guys lighting up this tournament. They have injuries, but they have, Aldred has come back. We heard he was out. He had a knee scope. He's going to start 8. I love Jalibert. I think Jalibert's actually got even more flair than Ntamack, and he's going to play 10. And the way it is in France is, okay, Ntamack has got lovely ability, but he's really got a great game sense and a great game management. But Dupont is so good. I think he'll manage the game, enough from 9, and Jalibert will just have a chance to make things happen. And they've got Italy away first up, and France have traditionally struggled against Italy. Even at home, they struggle sometimes. But I just think this team is a different level mentally. There's a feel good factor. They had a training camp down in Nice in the sun last week. They've got a really good mix of coaches. I mean, Galtier he was always seen as being the best technician in France. The issue he had was the day-to-day management of players, and the example I'd probably give is the Glenn Hoddle managing England and not understanding why someone couldn't put the ball on the sixpence like he could. And I think Galtier at club level got frustrated with sometimes the inability of certain players, or the monotony of the top 14 campaign of week in, week out. And he's someone who likes to get away and relax and do other things. But I think international rugby suits him down to the ground, where he has those breaks, but then he comes into camp for 7-8 weeks, and they really get into the nuts and bolts of game plans and strategy, and alongside Sean Edwards and Vlac Killier and the other French coaches that are there, they seem to have a really tight knit staff with Ibanez kind of the manager looking after the player management side of it, looking after the relationship with Bernard Laporte, looking after the relationship with the clubs, which has always been incredibly tetchy, but now there's a real alignment, and it's cost the LNR a lot of money and the FFR a lot of money to get this alignment, but they have it now, and they have a home World Cup in 2023. They have a national side who are shown some consistency. Let's not forget they've been to 2 World Cup finals in chaos. I mean, imagine the thought of where they could go with some alignment and some cohesion is frightening, because they've had some really good generations at under 20. And fitness levels and the type of rugby being played and the way the game's been refereed in the top 14 has changed to be more aligned to international rugby with ball and play time and less focus on penalties, etc. So I think there's a lot of movement in the right direction towards France being very strong at 2023, and I agree with Mike. I think they'll see this tournament as a chance to get silverware.
Mon Dieu, it's absolutely frightening now that you guys have laid it out. Are you backing them for this championship as well as Mike, Bernard?
I think they play England in Twickenham, so that was the only. I did tip England, but I think France will be very close to them. I think they'll win next year. They'll win next year with Ireland and England in Paris, and they may win this year. But I did back England, so I better stick to them.
Yeah, it'd be hilarious if it all fell apart now in typical fashion. Something goes wrong, Galtier falls out with Dupont or something like that. But otherwise, we'll watch with interest, because they've been great to watch. Just briefly on Italy, Mike. Just recently, myself and Bernard were talking about it on this podcast, and the frustrations probably with Italian rugby. What's your sense of that, or opinion on that? Do you think they're still worthy of this place in the Six Nations, or are we starting to ask questions now?
Well, their form and overall performance at club level has been. It seemed to be on an upward trajectory. Treviso had certainly challenged, and they'd gotten to the latter stages of the Pro 14 this season. I know this season is a bit of an anomaly in everything that's going on, but they've been extremely disappointing. The games at club level, it's hitouts almost for particularly Irish provinces. I know they put in a decent display against Munster a couple of weeks ago or last weekend, but that feeds into the national team. I think they had put a lot of stock in how Treviso were developing and how that was going to translate into the national team. Are they worthy of their place in the Six Nations? Look, it would be an absolute shame to see them drop out of it. I don't know, who would you replace them with, or would you go back to a Five Nations, or would you put Georgia in there? My sense would be to keep developing them, keep them in the tournament, and reevaluate. I think we're 21 years now into the Six Nations project, so I wouldn't make any changes as of now. I would hate to see them drop out. I think when they get their big wins and when they play well, they definitely add something, and they do have potential to eventually develop into a good quality rugby nation. Look, it's a slow burner, there's no doubt about it. I don't know what Birch's thoughts are on it. It's hard to say where they're at, really. Well, we know where they're at. They're not performing where they should be, but my sense would be to keep them in and keep trying to develop them for the sake of the global game.
Birch, you're still on the kind of playoff, I suppose, fence with it. You want to see them actually have to battle to keep their place.
Look, I agree with Mike. I think we probably do need to keep supporting them, but there's definitely potential there at the underage level. They seem to have improved. They are part of our domestic league, but I just think there's been a huge amount of money invested. There's been a huge amount of time spent waiting for them to develop. I would love to throw in the bottom of the Six Nations plays a playoff and keep everyone on their toes. And if Italy are good enough to beat the best in Europe, in Tier 2 in Europe, to stay in it, then fair enough. But I just don't see how the guaranteed entry, it hasn't actually led to any improvement. Now, and that's all. That's all. So I'm not saying they should be kicked out. I don't think we should go back to 5 Nations. I think the game can't afford that, because obviously that extra game is so important to everybody. But I think it'd be great for those Tier 2 countries in Europe to have the potential, and even let it be the bottom team plays at home, but give them a chance of getting in, and keep Italy or Scotland or Ireland or Wales or England or France on their toes, that if they finish bottom, they have to go and win one more game.
It would be good to see the game progress that way, but full well that Six Nations aren't going to even countenance that idea. They'll vehemently vote against it. So let's see what happens with Italy. Fingers crossed they step things up. The other game on Saturday is England-Scotland, 4:45. Again, England with some injury issues. Mako Vunipola, Launchbury's out. Underhill, Manu Tuilagi obviously missing a key guy, and Joe Marler withdrawing for kind of family reasons. Mike, Eddie Jones is talking about their need to adapt and evolve, having had a very successful 2020, obviously. What do you think he's getting at there in terms of England pushing things forward?
I just don't think he's the type of coach or guy to accept any excuses or reasons. I know he throws out bombs in the week of games and deflects kind of attention from the team, but internally I don't think he would. He just won't tolerate any kind of dropping of standards, or we're missing this guy, so maybe we shouldn't perform as well as we did previously. I think they've so much depth. They've so many good players in the positions that you mentioned. They have injuries that I wouldn't see it overall affecting them. I know Manu Tuilagi, he can change a team, but they just have so much quality. Their domestic competition is so competitive, and I think it makes up for a lot of that when they come into camp. They're at such a good level already, and he just has a really good, solid group around him. They know exactly what they're about. They'll play whatever rugby is necessary to win, and they have the ability to do that. To go through the gears, to kick, to play it wide, to brutalise teams. They have all that in their arsenal, so I don't think he'd be worried about the injuries. And coming up against Scotland, I think they've just flattered to deceive for a long time. They've spoken a big game. They've at club level and international. I remember watching the post-match analysis a couple of months ago, and Eddie O'Sullivan, I think, hit the nail on the head just about how they never really seem to deliver on the big talk that they put out during the week and before campaigns. So I would be absolutely shocked if they give England much trouble. I know that you can kind of cite the comeback draw a couple of years ago, but I just think England have too much for them.
Eddie O'Sullivan has a full nation against him, I think, after him looking for his head. But he was just being honest, I suppose, with that opinion.
He's got to back up now, Mike.
Yeah. We'll set the Scots after you, Mike. Listen, just on England, Mike mentioned it there with the kicking, and there was so much talk about that, Bernard, in the autumn. Did you feel it like, grand, that's what they do to be successful, or do you think that really does need to be evolved and adapted?
Yeah, I think Eddie's quite stubborn, and he has a key set of numbers that tells him that this is what wins international games. And I think probably the frustration is, and I in some ways I admire him for it, because effectively he doesn't want to give players any lack of clarity or cloud judgment. So he basically just copies and pastes the game plan, no matter if it's Italy or if it's Ireland or France. But there has been a bit of a backlash in terms of the actual quality of it. And I think there's certain games where they can show more ambition. Like the team they have, they can play the game any one of 10 ways. But it's slightly different than the Saracens model, which was more about contestables. It's more about finding grass in Eddie's model. But there is a huge amount of kicking the ball away, getting a high field position, and then putting a squeeze on teams with set piece opportunities, and it is literally a squeeze because of their defense is very good and the power they have, and that's where Scotland you'd imagine will struggle. I think England will see Finn Russell as being a weakness rather than a strength for Scotland, because of they'll try and send him down blind alleys, and okay, his kicking game is very good, but they'll have picked up some trends in that as well, and I just think that they're the worst nightmare for Finn. I know that the second half 2 years ago he was majestic, whatever, but let's be honest, the game, 9 times out of 100, the game is over, and it's highly unlikely England will ever collapse like that again, or get that loose. And potentially that was a turning point for Eddie, where he went, look what happens when we get loose. This nearly ended up being a disaster, and they took a last minute try to get a draw from a very dominant position. So he is making soundings that they want to evolve. Let's remember as well, he did change attack coach. Scott Whitemantle went back to Australia. He has a skills coach from Australia who couldn't come back, or decided not to come back because of COVID. So he's brought in Ed Robinson, Andy Robinson's son, actually, from Jersey, on a kind of a 2-month loan deal to work with the team. So he has had little changes behind the scenes, and particularly around that should affect his attacking game. But what has been constant is Matt Proudfoot, drilling a very good pack and drilling them well, and John Mitchell implementing a pretty impressive defensive system. So and they've won trophies with it, and I think they're 9 games, 10 games unbeaten now. So I think they will look to play a little bit more, but they'll play to their strengths, and that is power, set piece, territory.
What of Finn Russell, Mike? Is he a guy you want on your team, or the kind of guy you worry about when you lift your head out of the scrum?
No, for me, I'd absolutely love to play with a player like that. I think the frailties in his game are becoming less and less, and his overall quality and attacking shine and flair is beginning to dominate. Whereas before, maybe when he broke on the scene, he'd come up with 1 or 2 moments a game, but they'd be intermingled with a couple of high-profile mistakes. Whereas now, you watch him play with Racing, and more often than not, similar to Dupont, he's completely dictating the game with just moments of sheer class. And it's not just moments; they're leading to tries. They're leading to game-changing events. They're not just little bits of flicks in the middle of the field that don't really have an impact. They're beautiful crossfield kicks. They're lovely. He's an incredible ability to drop the ball onto his foot when he's in full flight and dink it over the defence and run onto it and offload it one-handed. And if England see him as a weakness, as Bert said, fair play to them. But I would not like to be defending against him, particularly as a hooker out in the pitch. And I'd love to play with the guy. I played against him several times, and he was a really, really hard person to know what he was doing, and more often than not had a very big impact on the game.
Yeah, himself and Stuart Hogg will hopefully give us a few highlight moments, but loads of really good rugby. Just briefly, Birch, there is another game involving an Irish team. Connacht are playing tomorrow night, Friday night, in the Pro 14. It's one of those rescheduled fixtures away to the Dragons, and they're coming off the back of 2 defeats after that big Leinster win. Feels like an important one, even if it's under the radar, I suppose, for most people.
Yeah, I think it's really important for Connacht to get back on the horse. They've to be bitterly disappointed away. Some of the games have gone for them over the last 2 months. Bar that great win in the RDS, but I think we've seen the Welsh teams, the Irish teams being able to generally do a number on them. You know, Leinster went over the Scarlets and were incredibly impressive. And I think for Connacht, they'll see this as a must-win game. And you know, I think they have the tools. I mean, the Dragons are missing a couple of guys in Welsh squad, and I think they have the pack. I think it's the front five is where they'll get dominance, and I think they'll get the win.
Yeah, here's hoping for 2 Irish wins. I'm going to get your predictions on the Six Nations games, but before that, just a bit of a plug. Basically, want to let the listeners know that we're going to have extra post-match podcasts for our membership on the 42. That's after every Ireland game in Six Nations. We'll also have our Monday podcast as usual with the brilliant Owen Toolan. On top of that, you have your weekly rugby newsletters. And as always, the members WhatsApp group is very lively and kind of drives our coverage. So it's been brilliant. Also a live event we're going to have for members very soon. Details on that. So just check out members.the42.ie if you want to join us. But lads, right, prediction time. Italy v France, England v Scotland, Wales v Ireland. Just give me your 3 winners there. You're up first, Birch.
England, France, Ireland, all the favourites.
Any different, Mike?
No, no, boringly enough, no.
Okay, I think most people are going to be on that boat, but here's hoping for a bit of an upset. Lads, thanks a million. Birch, it's been great to have you on. Cheers.
Yeah, thanks. Good to work with you, Mike.
You too, Birch.
Cheers, Mike.
Not at all. Pleasure. Sorry I couldn't have my video on. I was dialed up to the nines, but internet out here in the sticks.
You're afraid of Scots. You're afraid of Scots to your face.
Yeah, watch your back, Mike. But listen, thanks to everyone else for the fantastic questions, as always, and for listening to us nattering away for the last hour. This episode of the 42 Rugby Weekly was sponsored by William Hill. Please gamble responsibly, and for more information, visit dunlewy.net. For members, we'll speak to you post-match on Sunday and then again on Monday. For everyone else, we're back next Thursday. So catch you then. Enjoy the rugby.